Hey everyone, it says that it is live. Here it is. Hello from your empowering educator. My name is Carrie. I am a tarot comedian. I perform improv and stand up in the Sacramento area and have been exploring a new performance art called tarot stand up, wherein I do a live comedic tarot reading. It is live, an audience. And I like to occasionally come on Facebook and just like play around a little bit. Sometimes it feels like I'm speaking into the void, and that's okay because sometimes the void speaks back. But I have been working with my deck, the Numinous deck, and this card, number 15, the Shadow from the Major Arcana, came out, and it has been renamed in this deck from the Devil, which it is typically of the Major Arcana in other tarot decks. And this card often shows up for me when I am wrestling with myself. And as you can see, you have this figure here who has no eyes, has a gaping hole in their chest, and is tied through that hole with their hands around their neck to kind of signify that the wound is coming from within and it is keeping the figure, who represents all of us at different phases of our journey, being tied by our own patterns. The last time I really did a deep dive into this card, I used the analogy from Creed 1, where Rocky is training Creed to fight and puts him in front of a mirror at one point and, has him do some jabs and punches to his reflection. And he says, yeah, what happens every time you punch? And Creed says he punches back. So what do you got to do? I got to get out of the way. So he proceeds to avoid his own punches in the mirror. And Rocky says, every time you go into the ring, that's who you're going against. Doesn't matter who your opponent is, your number one enemy is yourself. And like, fuck, man, that got me right in the heart, which is like kind of where this gaping hole is. And the lesson that we can learn from the shadow that may resonate in your own life is to not get into our own way when it comes to really achieving what we want for ourselves. So as I was talking about all of that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards came flying out the deck. And interestingly, all except one of them are reversed. So usually to me, that means that these are all cards that are going to give me some kind of additional information about my relationship with the shadow right now. And for those of you who are watching, whenever that may be, it could be in one day, it could be in 1 year, it could be in 1 decade. If the internet still exists at that point, I don't really know how the world is going to be. That's for another time. But what I invite you to do is think about your own life and what you really want for yourself. The Major Arcana outlines the hero's journey. So number 15 is pretty far along the journey, where we've gotten to a measure of success and growth within our own hero's journey, but there's still some things that are keeping us from what we truly want. So the invitation for you right now, whenever you're watching this, is to just think about your own life, what you most want for yourself, and how you might be getting in your own way. The cards that come out, I'm going to talk about them in terms of how they're showing up in my life and how they could give more information about the shadow. And you're allowed to keep what works for you and say fuck it to the rest of it. So the first card that came out was the reversed 5 of Vials. So this is the Suit of Cups. And often this is a card of deep grief, as you can sort of see in the image. There is a figure whose head is in their hands, 3 vials that are smashed to shit on the table, and some roses that look like they've been kind of like withered. And the figure can't even look to those vials, and is also missing the 2 completely intact vials and the vibrant rose on the ledge behind them. There's also a full moon there, and full moon is all about what's coming to light. What can we really see within ourselves that needs to be tended to? 5s are also usually cards of like power dynamic shifting. So if you think of a 4 as being very stable, a 5 can kind of put that off kilter. So there might be a sense of like rebalancing going on here. And I know for myself, the thing that's coming up for me is some grief around how I am structuring my time, and how, even though I'm giving myself the gift of like what I actually want, I am still acting from certain old patterns that are preventing me from feeling the emotional fulfillment and feeling safe within that. So I can identify with this card because I am only looking to like what I'm not doing right, and the shame and the grief around feeling like I never do anything right. And I'm neglecting to see these 2 full bottles, which are perfectly intact, vibrant, luminous in this moonlight, which is showing me that not all is lost. There is a lot of good stuff that is coming, hopefully, around the bend. It's just a matter for me to kind of be with myself in the grief and allow myself to feel that so that I can move forward. Maybe it's landing for you in some way. The next card that came out is number 12, which is the Hanged One. And this is the only one that came out upright, but oddly, the figure is upside down. However, the figure does not look unhappy upside down. They have this golden shimmering halo around their fabulous hair. They are in some kind of like an ethereal in-between world, it looks like, because there's this door into the tree that they're hanging on. And this is the card of like surrender. So when I think about me getting in the way of myself and having to tend to the grief of this, the invitation here is to kind of surrender what has no longer working for me to spirit, divine, God, source, whatever word you want to use, and trust that whatever is coming next, which in the major arcana, number 13 is the card that comes after this, which is the death card. Doesn't mean anyone's going to die, just means that some part of our life, the way we are living it now, is going to be no more. So for me, this is telling me that I am sort of at a surrender point to say, I'm doing the best I can with what I got. I have to look at the grief. I have to look at the positive, and I have to surrender all of that to my source, divine, higher power, and say, all right, I'm here, I'm waiting, and I will not necessarily like be at the whim, but like, yes, because control is an illusion and we never actually have control over our lives. Whoop-de-doo. The next card that came out reversed was the Chariot. And this is a Chariot year. So we have got the motion of moving from the conscious into the unconscious. So we are going from, now I've gained awareness to this grief that is in my life. I've gained awareness to what is no longer serving me, and I'm surrendering that to God. Now movement is possible. When it comes to reversals, in my mind, they usually indicate for me an internal shift. Whereas if the card is upright, it's some sort of an external result that might come, or an external like focus that I'm looking at. But because I'm seeing these as reversals, I'm seeing them as like, this is the work that needs to be done within my own body. You might not read reversals, you might read them differently, but that's what works for me. And the Chariot also is about shedding old skin. So if you think about like a hermit crab who has to change shells every couple of, I don't know how long it takes hermit crabs to grow. They have to eventually get a bigger house, because if they stay in their small house, then they're going to die most likely because it doesn't serve them anymore. It's not big enough. But in order to leave that shell, they have to let their little pink fleshy bits be out and vulnerable to potential carnivores, threats, predators. That's the word I was looking for. Until they can find a new home that fits them. So the invitation here is to find the vulnerable fleshy parts within and reassure them that they are better served out in the open than suffocating within the house that no longer fits them. Whew, that feels good. So while I'm waiting for sort of the surrender and potentially an external sign that is showing me, or potentially, you know, me putting out things into the universe to say that I surrender, there's also internal movement happening in terms of my growth. Next, we got the Four of Vials, also reversed. And I talked about stability of the fours before. This card feels like a reminder that, again, I need to look beyond like what's right in front of me, what has been safe and stable up until this point in terms of emotional stability. And I got to look at the whole ocean that's behind me. Because if I'm getting in the way of myself, I need to grieve, I need to surrender, I need to be vulnerable and shed old things, and I need to be able to look at the broader picture and see what else is out there that is going to sustain me emotionally, that isn't going to keep me safe and small. Again, because this is reverse, I'm seeing this as like an internal shift where I need to potentially just like reallocate these vials within my being to understand how things that are currently in my life are able to emotionally fulfill me. And maybe you'll be able to do the same. Next, I got number 19, the Sun, which is actually my personal card of the year, which can be calculated by your birthday, so your month, your date, those digits added together, added to 2023, which is 7. So for me, it's 5, 7, and then plus 7. So that adds up to 19, which is the Sun. So the Sun to me is the you're almost fucking there card. It's you can see the top of the mountain that you have been scaling. You have just finished the battle, but still have to tend to all the wounded. You have timed everything perfectly for the meal that you are making. You just need to add the garnishes to the plate, right? So in terms of this shadow, this keeping myself small and safe, grieving, surrendering, shedding what no longer works, looking and reallocating the supports in my life, the Sun is kind of the encouragement that like, I'm almost there. I'm on the way to making sure that I am less in my way in the future, because it doesn't go away ever. Fuck it. I wish it did. But there's always going to be some part that is trying to keep me safe, trying to keep me protected. And even though it's getting in the way of my growth, it also means that my brain's working well, which I appreciate. The last card that came out was the Five of Bells. And this is the second five that we've gotten. So this is another card of contraction, of hierarchy, of rebalancing. And bells are the suit of thoughts. So it's air, communication, ideas, mental processes. And I often have seen this card just because of the depiction of it in this deck. For me, it kind of has to do with like fucking over capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy. It's like, topple that shit. Things are coming down. Because the next card, the Six of Bells, is like a transition card. It's like moving to new shores with new supports. And kind of the last thing to, similar to the Sun card, it's like the last thing that we need to do before we can move on to new shores is like topple the hierarchy. And in this case, it feels like it's a good reminder that like my thoughts are not always true. They're not always there to protect. Sorry, they are always there to protect me, but they're not always true. And what I think that this whole thing is kind of saying is like, you need to reallocate your thought processes. So you're not just focusing on the negative, the grief. You are reminding yourself of all of the things that fulfill you. You're reminding yourself of how far you have come in this journey of untangling yourself from these past survival strategies. And it's okay to take a moment to breathe in. It's okay to be vulnerable and to surrender to whatever comes, because this is an ongoing journey. And while I like to believe that, you know, there is a viewpoint that is most ideal for this stage in the journey, it doesn't stop, because once we get to the viewpoint, like we have to climb back down, right? Or we need to resupply before we do it again or get to the top. What's also interesting is that we got 4 major arcana cards, 2 vials cards, and then 1 bell. So with the major arcana cards, this is like big energy. I almost said big dick energy, but it isn't, because it's big Volta energy, says the feminist in me. But really, it's like, this is like big stuff that I'm working through, and you might be working through it too. So I also feel like all of this is reminding me and you that this is not easy work. This isn't one and done work. This is cyclical, spiralic. I'm going to go a couple steps forward and then a couple steps back at all different turns. But I think the encouraging thing here with these 2 upright cards, so again, thinking about death coming after the Hanged One, and after the Shadow comes the Tower, which again, a lot of people get fucked when they see the Tower, but the Tower is a chance to rebuild from zero. So both of these upright cards are kind of like, hey, the next step here might not be pretty. You might be letting go of some shit. You might be having to start from square one, but in the next phase, you will then be leveling up, where you've grieved, you've found the emotional stability you need, you've paused to put the finishing touches, you've reallocated the hierarchy of your thoughts, and you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable to kind of take what now you understand in your life and put it into action. And I keep saying you, but like really, this is me just having a conversation with myself, because I don't know if anyone's actually ever going to watch this. So for me, Carrie, you're doing fucking great. You and the devil / the shadow are going to be boxing from time to time, and that's okay. it's good to just remind yourself that this too shall pass, and that in the grand scheme of things, like, you're doing a great fucking job. And if you are watching this, I say the same to you. I would love to hear if this lands with you. And if you do watch to this point, I want you to talk about Rocky or Creed in a comment to me, just so I know you listened, just so I know it landed, and just so I know that the internet is still functioning in 10 years when the apocalypse comes. My name is Carrie. I am your empowering educator, and I am signing off for now.